Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Zach. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Zach Gale Experience. I'm your host, Zach Gale, and today we're going to be talking about fractional reserve banking that is ran through the Federal Reserve. So before I start, I want to have to make sure I cover the difference between the two different types of currencies there. There is a base currency, which is what we actually used to use prior to 1913 with the establishment of the Federal Reserve. Base currency is something that is backed by either gold or silver or another precious metal. And I'll at some point speak on where it says in the Constitution that only gold and silver is legal tender. But also a fiat currency, so basically a base currency is a currency that holds its value after a set amount of years. Whereas a fiat currency does not hold its intrinsic value. So that basically means that it's basically the same as monopoly money. And so with that being said, let's get into it. So let's shift back in time really quick to 1913 with the establishment of the Federal Reserve, as well as the IRS, which is responsible for collecting taxes on our revenue, or our personal revenue. So in 1913, the Federal Reserve issued what are called bonds. Bonds are the base word of the word bondage, which is basically what puts everybody it uses as fiat currency into. So the Federal Reserve issued the first bonds. Let's just say I am the United States Treasury, which is where the bonds would go to from the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve is on the left, the U.S. Treasury is on the right, and they essentially both swap bonds. The U.S. Treasury says we will pay you back for these bonds that you issue with the principal plus the interest. While the Federal Reserve doesn't have to pay anything because they issued the money out of the account that doesn't have any money on it. So let's just say I'm the U.S. Treasury, and 1913 comes around, I get the very first dollar. So whenever you buy something at the bank, whenever you get a loan or anything like that, you have to pay back what's called the principal, which is what you borrow plus interest. So if I borrow the very first dollar, there's $1 in existence, but you have to pay interest back as well. So there's $2 debt, $1 in existence. You may ask, where does that second dollar come from? Well, you have to borrow that second dollar into existence. So there's now $2 in existence, $4 debt. And if I wanted to pay off that $4 debt, I'd have to essentially borrow a total of $4 into existence, and then there'd be $8 in debt. I'll explain this when I get to the later steps of the banking process. So after the Federal Reserve issues the notes, they send them to the U.S. Treasury, and the U.S. Treasury basically gives them an IOU to say, we'll pay you back the principal plus the interest at some point. The U.S. Treasury then distributes and disperses those bonds, and they turn those bonds into cash that is minted at the U.S. Treasury. And with that, they disperse the cash to the various branches of government, the executive, legislative, and judicial branch, as well as the other little branches that have funds required and allocated to them. And that pays for stuff like war, because we love war, social projects, and about everything else. So the government contractors are the first people people in our government, the first people to get the currency. And with that being said, once they get that currency and they get paid either through military or through building something for our government or whatever else that our government will be paying somebody for, they then take their money to the bank and they deposit their money, because that's what people do. And once they deposit their money in the bank, most states only have anywhere from 0% to 10% requirement for what the bank is required to have in vault cash. Let's just say it's 10% for the purpose of easy numbers. So let's just say you go to the bank with $100 and you deposit your $100 in the bank. The bank will immediately loan out 90% or $90 of your money in the form of loan, mortgages, or whatever else other services they offer. So you may be wondering, well, what happens to the rest of my $90 when I go to the bank? Well, of course, when you go to the bank, they're going to give you what you request. But in so if you were to go to the bank with the first $100 and they loan out $90, there's now $190 in existence. And let's just say the person that you loan the money out to, I mean the bank loaned the money out to, got a car loan. Let's just say they want to get a used car. So person number two that got the money from the bank, they pay person number three for the service or the good that they require. And then person number three goes to the bank and deposits that same $90 into the bank as well. And they loan out 90% of that as well, which would be like $80 or something. So with all this being said, around 97%, I think it's 92 to 95%. I learned about this in microeconomics. So it's about 92 to 95% of our money is actually created through this fractional reserve lending. Every time you go to the bank, they loan out, let's just say 90% of it, and then they keep on loaning out and compounding. That's why most of our currency is just digital and it doesn't have any value. Well, it doesn't have any uh, physical line of where it's at. Essentially, a lot of it's just numbers on a screen. So after the banks keep on continuing the money supply, because what all this is doing, it's creating more and more. Either if it's physical or if it's on a computer, it's expanding the money supply. And what this does is it causes inflation, which inflation is just a response to an increase in the money supply. And when there's an increase in the money supply, there is also cost of goods go up, the cost of living goes up, everything else goes up as well, like healthcare and everything, including education as well. So that being said, we work for portions of this money supply. We spend hours over a day, or we do something we're good at. We trade something that we can physically manifest to that has value, and after we essentially trade our blood, sweat, and tears for this, we are also taxed on it. And what happens with the taxes, a lot of people think that it goes to roads, schools, other public works. What it actually does is it goes directly to the IRS, which gives the money to the U.S. Treasury to pay back on that IOU, the principal plus the interest to the Federal Reserve. So a quick recap is that it starts at the Federal Reserve. They write an account that has a zero account balance, and then they give it to the U.S. Treasury. The U.S. Treasury in turn gives them an IOU, which are both just pieces of paper that are basically saying that I'm going to pay you X amount at a certain point. And after the U.S. Treasury gets it, they mince the money that they get, and then they disperse it to all different governmental programs. And then governmental contractors, people in the military, and also government officials are the first to spend it into circulation. Most of the time, they deposit in the bank. Once the bank gets the money, they loan out 90 and sometimes, in some cases, 100% of it. And then after they do this, they keep on doing that, keeps on compounding. Called fractional reserve banking or fractional reserve lending. And with that being said, after that, we work for the money supply, which all this causes inflation and a devaluation of our currency. That's why, since we have a fiat-based currency, we've lost 97% of our purchasing power since 1913 when this system was enacted. And so, since we work for this money and we're taxed on it, because there's Every single month, no matter what, the bills will keep on coming in, and there's still principal plus the interest on every dollar in existence. Back to what I said at the very beginning. When the very first dollar was in existence, there was not only the principal plus the interest on that. So if there's, I'll explain it again really quick to get into the last and final step of our banking system. So there's $1 in existence. I own the very first dollar, but I have to pay back a total of $2, principal plus the debt on that dollar. The second dollar right here, I have to borrow that second dollar into existence, which is my middle finger in the sand. So now there's $2 in existence, but there's $4 debt. And this gets into the debt ceiling. If I were to take the dollar plus the debt and essentially eliminate it, there's still $2 debt. And the whole illusion of a debt ceiling or being able to pay off the debt is just an illusion. And politicians use this as a weapon to either get more funding or to essentially they just kick the can down the road and hope that it doesn't fall down on their watch. But with all this being said, we use a fiat-based currency, and it says explicitly in the Constitution that only gold and silver are to be legal tender for us to use. And with that being said, it's not only unconstitutional, but if we had a base currency, our currency, we wouldn't have lots of the problems we have today with, rising healthcare costs, rising education costs, rising cost of living, housing. A lot of that stuff wouldn't be as at the point it is at now if you had a currency that held its value over the course of many years. And sort of the final part I'm going to leave it off on is that before all this, it was actually unconstitutional to have an income tax. Or right when the Federal Reserve was enacted in 1913, they actually changed the laws and overturned previous Supreme Court cases, allowing us to be taxed on our income. And we partially started a war over a 2% tax on tea back during the Revolutionary War, also including the Crown trying to steal a small cache of guns and arrest several founders. But of course, you can research more about that. That's not the topic of this video. But the final thing to leave everybody with is that let's see. So that's essentially our whole banking system. And there was one more thing I was going to say. Oh yeah, and centralized banking was one of the reasons why that one of the freedoms that our founders wanted to essentially avoid back in the day. They tried to make it so that way only Congress had the enumerated powers to decide the value of a currency and to issue it. And nowadays, the Federal Reserve is neither federal nor has any reserves, it has stockholders. I'm pulling up their website right now, federalreserve.gov, and there are tabs that talk about stockholder information and whatnot. So only public entities have stockholder information, and it's not only not federal because it has public ownership or quote unquote public ownership, because not just anybody can own a share of the Federal Reserve. Quite possibly just the charter banks that work hand in hand with the Federal Reserve, as well as other powerful families throughout the world. But with all this being said, it's still a good idea to invest in base currency, which is gold and silver, because at some point the debt level can only handle so much before it actually ultimately comes to or ultimately actually blows itself up. Because this sort of system, that's what it's designed to do. It's designed to not only put everybody that uses it in bondage and essentially making the people that own the Federal Reserve wealthier while making the rest of us have to work harder to enjoy the same prosperity that the people before us enjoyed. But yeah, in conclusion, that's how the Federal Reserve works. That's the difference between a fiat-backed currency as opposed to a base currency. And I give a citation to Gold and Silver with Mike Maloney. I sort of just summarized a couple of his videos as well as some other prior information I had. Feel free to check out his channel. He has nice visuals when it comes to what I was explaining. I kind of want to keep it short. And I will probably go live talking about something else here in a little bit. But yeah, I hope everybody has a great day. Leave a like on the video and subscribe if you'd like to see more content such as this. It lets me know that there is more interest about topics like this. And if you're listening on podcast, feel free to let me know on either Spotify or Anchor or whatever you're listening on that you enjoyed it. And I will see everybody soon. And have a great day. Don't forget to turn notifications on when I do have new videos, so you'll be one of the first to get the inside scoop. And we are ending it here.